One of the most overlooked aspects of video game world building is the art of costume design. This is especially true in modern fantasy games, where the costuming often goes unnoticed because of the genre's reliance on recreating existing style trends. Final Fantasy VIII is no stranger to being ignored, and the same is largely true for its costume design. In this video, we're going to take a look at how Square Enix's red-headed stepchild uses the art of costuming to create fashionable, fearsome, and unforgettable villains, and how the character's clothing can end up foreshadowing some of the game's most shocking plot twists. The main antagonist of Final Fantasy VIII is Ultima, a time traveler from the future who wants to control time and space in order to eradicate Seed, a group of teenage mercenaries trying to kill her, because she keeps trying to kill them for trying to kill her, whatever. Time is weird in this game. The most important thing about Ultima, however, is that she is a sorceress, a term the game uses interchangeably with witch. This is important, because Ultima's costuming is heavily inspired by 17th century Puritanism, and the fear-mongering it created about witchcraft. In her book on witchcraft in colonial New England, The Devil in the Shape of a Woman, American historian Carol F. Carlson writes that witches had no respect for their society's rules governing sexual behaviour, as witches' carnal appetites were both internally uncontrolled and externally uncontrollable, and that lewd and naughty life was a sign of probable witchcraft. Now, let's take a look at Ultima's design. You notice anything? The game depicts Ultima as overtly sexual to show the audience that she's a villain. Her outfit is the most provocative in the game. Her dress is skin tight and cut all the way down to the middle to show off her legs, navel, and chest, which the tattoos on her body draw attention to. Her makeup is bold, dark, and smoky-eyed with dark red lips, all the staples of the femme fatale archetype. The other way the game indicates Ultima's villainy is with inhuman or animalistic features. Ultima's hair is arranged in the shape of two giant horns. Her fingers and toes are sharpened like claws, and her feet are bare and stained black. Large black wings protrude from her back. This is not a human woman we're dealing with. This is a devil in the shape of a woman. Finally, the colour scheme in Ultima's design is ultimately one of the most revealing aspects of her character. Ultima's dominant colour is red. In colour symbolism, red is often used to represent anger, violence, strength and power, which is why it's often used with antagonistic characters. The type of red used in Ultima's design is a darker, more purple-toned red that's often used to represent royalty, luxury, and power through nobility, something we can see reflected in the intimidating design of Ultima's castle. Ultima's greatest desire is to have power, specifically to have power through rulership, making herself the new dictator of Galbadia and attempting to become the ruler of time and space. Red is also used throughout Final Fantasy VIII to indicate the presence of magic. In this game, magic is a dangerous, mutated force. Magic's association with danger is largely because of its association with witches, the only characters in the game who can use magic naturally. It makes sense then that the colour is so prominent in Ultima's design, as a character who is so dangerous because of how much magic she controls. But red isn't the only colour prominent in her design. Black, the colour most commonly used to indicate evil or death, is used to accent Ultima's design, with her black feet, black feather collar and black wings, which almost evoke the idea of a fallen angel. The most interesting colour in Ultima's design, however, is the colour purple. Purple is a very common villain colour. It's used to represent greed, ambition, and status, but it's also used to represent something alien or unnatural. In Ultimicia's first form, the colour purple isn't very prominent. You can actually barely see it until you look closely at her character model. However, as the final boss battle progresses, so too does the prominence of purple. By the time we reach Ultimicia's final form, this grotesque, omnipotent shell, purple has become Ultimicia's dominant colour, taking over from red. The more Ultimecia embraces her greed and ambition for power, the more uncomfortably inhuman she becomes. Her magic and sense of control are, like her human body, hanging on by a thread. The only part of Ultimecia that is still her original red is the bottom area around her human form, indicating that the monster is taking over, and that Ultimecia, suspended from what almost looks to be an umbilical cord of sorts, has been ejected from her own body and is now being used merely as a power source. The tragic consequences of girl bossing too close to the sun. Adele is an interesting case to study because we know barely anything about her. The one time we get a close-up look at her character model, there's an unconscious teenager taking up half the space. The most notable thing about Adele's character design is her size. According to the wiki, she's at least 4 times the size of an average person. Where the game used sexuality to show Ultimecia's villainy, here the game uses Adele's masculinity to do the same. Both witches deviate from the norms of femininity to indicate to the player that they are strange and evil, very much in line with Puritan ideology. Unlike Ultimecia, who gets somewhat fleshed out by the end of the game, Adele is pretty one-dimensional. She's a brutal dictator with no morals and no empathy. And this lack of humanizing her character is reflected in her design. Her eyes are pure red. Her skin is a pale grey, an unnatural colour imitating sickness. Her hair is bright red, a much more vibrant and alarming colour than we saw with Ultimecia. Everything about her body's colour palette screams danger and aggression, as does her costuming. While many have assumed that Adele is topless, if you look at the close-up of her character model, you can see she's actually wearing thin black armour across her chest and shoulders, matching her long black skirt. Her thin, wiry horns are pointed at the tip and attached to facial armour. Her wings are long, jagged spikes, like weapons. We've gone over the symbolism of the colour black before, but notice the simplicity of her colour design compared to Ultimecia. Adele is, literally, black and white. There's not much else to her other than evil. Normally, the colour white here might indicate some sort of purity or innocence about Adele, but if you look at the bottom of the cloth here, the colour and the pattern make it seem like it's stained with blood. Adele is a destroyer of innocence. She kidnaps children to be her apprentice. Notice how that bloodied cloth leads right up to Renoa's body, foreshadowing that Adele will forcefully turn Renoa into her successor. Hey, so when I made this video, I genuinely thought it was Adele who gave Renoa her powers. Turns out it's Adele, so my bad. Sorry. There are 2 Adeas in Final Fantasy VIII. The game will try to tell you that one of them is good and one of them is bad. But I don't agree. So I'm talking about both of them here. Adele is introduced as a dark, foreboding presence, but where red was Ultimecia's prominent colour, purple is Adele's. The world of Final Fantasy VIII positions itself as a high-tech, futuristic environment running on machinery and electricity. It isn't until Adele's coronation that we see the more fantasy elements of Final Fantasy appear. Adele's dark purple colour scheme, from her dress to her headpiece, not only marks her out as this game's first villain, but also shows how alien and unnatural her presence is in this machine-focused world. Like Ultimecia, Adele is presented as very regal and with a desire for power and control through leadership. In fact, Sorceress Adele's design has a lot of similarities to Ultimecia. A dark skin-tight dress, a V-neck slit that exposes the chest, clawed fingers, and dark, sultry eye makeup. This is, of course, not a coincidence. We later discover that the real Adele had been possessed by Ultimisha during this scene and is doing her bidding. But Adele's sorceress design is actually a great example of costume as foreshadowing. Where the other sorceresses have 2 horns and have their hair exposed, Adele's head is covered by a 3-horned headpiece. She has no facial markings like Ultimisha and Adele. Instead, thick gold veins spread across her face from underneath the headpiece. Already, we're being given the impression that something is not quite right about Adele and that something or someone might be controlling her. Also, look at the design of the headpiece itself. The horns are curled, almost like a whelk or a conch shell. Another shell-looking spiral sits beneath it. This is possibly a reference to the Centra orphanage. The small clock symbolizes that time travel has brought this version of Adele into existence, sending Ultimisha back to the past in order to possess her. Another element of foreshadowing. Unlike other witches in the game, whose wings act as an added appendage and come naturally out of their bodies, Adele's wings are fake. A combination of a metallic gold frame and flowing white fabric attached to the back of her dress. Like the sorceress Adele herself, these wings are a construction, created to project an illusion. When the sorceress Adele is revealed to be Adele Kramer, we get to see the real person behind the projection. Adele Kramer is this game's quote-unquote good witch, and it's important to view her design through this lens, because this is what the game believes a good woman should look like. Adele and Ultimisha have these fantastical, colourful, and otherworldly designs, but Adele Kramer blends in with the 90s inspired outfits of the other game's characters. But what else do you notice about her outfit? The colours are dull and lifeless. A dark grey dress with a light grey t-shirt underneath. Her chest, shoulders, and legs are fully covered. She wears no makeup and no jewellery. Her hair is loose and unstyled. Adele Kramer is the perfect Puritan woman. Her trustworthiness as a character is largely related to the fact that she is non-sexual, motherly, and sacrificial. The other sorceresses are contrasted against Adele, and this is how the game tells you, through nothing but their clothing, how badly Adele and Ultimisha fall short of being good. The first thing to note about Cypher's costume design is its heavy religious influence. The red cross on his shoulder is the Santiago cross, or the cross of St. James. It originated in 12th century Spain as a symbol of Christianity's war against Muslims in Europe and North Africa. The red of the cross represented the blood of Jesus, and the white background represented purity. The cross of St. James is named after James the Greater, one of the 12 apostles. In the Bible, James the Greater is a pretty violent supporter of Jesus, going so far as to offer to burn down a village for him. He is also the first of the apostles to be martyred. Including this cross in Cypher's design reflects his religious, often violent, devotion to his romantic dream, and his willingness to sacrifice himself and others for the cause. White is often used in costume design to indicate purity, and it is a very prominent feature in Cypher's design. This is in part to contrast Squall, who sports a predominantly black colour scheme. But purity is a feature of Cypher's character, just not perhaps in the traditional sense. Cypher's purity is not one of innocence or goodness, it's one of ignorance and naivety. Cypher's ambitions to be a knight are rooted in his childhood. He watched a film about a brave knight as a boy, and has clung to that idea ever since, even adjusting how he uses his gunblade to mimic the film's main character. His undershirt, a blue vest with a white cross on the chest, is the same shirt we see him wear as a boy in the Centra orphanage. He is, quite literally, carrying his childhood dream with him into adulthood. Cypher is inherently childish. He has the mindset of a young boy, and as such, is very easily taken advantage of by the sorceress Adele, who plays on his insecurities about boyhood to convince him to join her. When we compare Cypher's costume to the school uniforms or modern casual clothes that his classmates wear, he often looks rather out of place among his peers. Cypher's costume is just that, a costume. No matter where he is perpetually trying to live out the fantasy of being a knight, even if it alienates him from everyone else. The only time his outfit doesn't look out of place is when he's standing beside Adele as her knight, finally living out his romantic dream, at a terrible, terrible cost.